and we will continue this discussion. Others, any inputs that you're looking for on deployment? What are you keen on learning? Any issues you face? Anything you're curious about? Just wait for one more comment and then get started. Okay, let's assume there are none then. Okay, couple of comments here. Does offline Gramex support capture handler? Yes, it does, Kamlesh. Let's talk about that as part of offline install. And setting up Gramex as a Windows service. Okay, got it. Let's take these up as part of the discussion. What I'll do is start off maybe with one new feature in Gramex that I definitely want you to be aware of, and then go into some of these. So firstly, the deploy guide for Gramex has been tweaked slightly, and we now have a deployment checklist that reflects how we work on applications. So first thing we do is set up Gramex. Now that obviously means you'll have to get permission from either our or their IT team. And if you have internet access, we'll use the default installation or else we'll use the offline installation. This is what we'll cover shortly. Second is setting up the project itself. Now, what this means is that we have to get the code from GitLab or your local machine into the server. And one way of doing that is through some form of continuous integration so that whenever you push a commit, it automatically gets deployed. We use Monitor for that internally, but we can use the CI mechanism for to push this into any server. If the server is not directly accessible, then we can use our sync SFTP or whatever is the copy mechanism. But in any case, one thing that we want to make sure is that any secrets, passwords are not stored directly in a way that is accessible to end users. Those should be kept only on the server side. We also don't ideally want to commit them into the repository because the repository is something that we maintain. The secrets are something that our clients may maintain. So this is the topic I'll be covering first, which is how to use Gramex secrets and use continuous integration to deploy. That apart, we can make sure that it runs automatically on startup. For Windows, the documentation on how to run it as a Windows service is available, and we, time permitting, will quickly cover that. And similarly, the documentation for running as a Linux service is available, and this is updated to use the latest conventions. And we can briefly talk about this. Then we set up the domain or the path. Probably the biggest step here is setting up HTTPS, for which we normally use certbot, and that seems to be the fastest way of getting a domain name, but 90% of this is usually the client's concern. Then we set up a reverse proxy on Nginx, and this again has been updated to reflect some of the newer features of Gramex, and I'll be talking through this. So to sum up, what we'll be talking about today is how to use Gramex secrets to keep passwords and access tokens safe, how to deploy an application offline, how to use reverse proxy, specifically one of the newer features that we have, which is the X request URI feature. And time permitting, we'll also cover Gramex as a Windows service. If you have any other topics that come to your mind as this discussion goes on, please put that into the chat window and we'll take it up. So I'm going to start with secrets. Now, why do we need secrets? Supposing we use a Google Auth, or we are connecting to a database and that database has a password. The way we currently handle it is we type in whatever is the key or the secret or the user ID and the password directly into gramex.yaml. This in itself is not a problem if we are allowed to share the password internally. But in some cases, we do not have access to the password. In some cases, we are not allowed to share the password internally. So the better mechanism instead is to use a separate file which is not committed and can be edited in the target environment. So how does one do that? So in the most recent version of Gramex 1.64, which was released earlier this month, there are three ways we've added of doing this. Specifically, the .secrets.yaml file, where you can put in this kind of a configuration. By default, .secrets.yaml will not be committed. So you'll have to figure out a way of getting it to the server, and I'll explain how you do that. But this is a simple YAML file where you have a key and a value, such as any password or authentication secret or token. And these are available in gramex.yaml as, say, $password, $Google auth secret, whatever you put in as the key. And these can be used directly in whatever location you need. Remember, we ought not to be committing the secrets.yaml. By default, if you use Gramex in it, secrets.yaml will not be committed. But the whole point is to not commit this. So let's look at how this could be used. I'll create a sample repo. Make the screen bigger. Let me know. I hope it's visible, but if it's not, just put in a message on the chat window letting me know, and I'll make sure that it's visible. Let's see. Secrets demo. So in this secrets demo, I'm going to create a gramex.yaml file. And let's say this has a URL in which we have a home page with a pattern hash, which let's say is some form handler to some URL. Let's look at the form handler URL patterns. And let's say it's a connection to an Oracle database like this. Now here we have the username and password. Now this is, let's say, my password and my ID. If we put it this way, we are obviously committing it directly. So instead, let us assume that we have this user and password as environment variables. Now, if I create a secrets.secrets.yaml file in which we put in user : user ID, password : secret, password. These variables are automatically available here. Now, how do we prove it? Well, I don't have a database that has a user ID and password, so just convert this to a function handler. And this takes a function that, let's say, converts it to a string using $user, $pass. User is equal to this, comma, pass is equal to this. Because string interpolation works, I can just directly run this. Let's run Gramex. And so far, it's just loaded the application as it normally would. Let's open the home page. So it's a user ID is equal to user ID, pass is equal to is blank. Means it didn't get the variable pass. That's because this was password. So if I change this to password, that works. Now, if I change the secrets.yaml, let's say from user ID, I change this to alpha and password to beta and save it, but I have not restarted Gramex, this still will not change even if I reload this. That's because .secrets.yaml is not reloaded by default. You'll have to restart the application. We don't expect the secrets to change that often. Once you reload it, it gets refreshed. If you believe that reloading is essential, then let me know. We can incorporate that as a feature by watching for this file changing. Any questions on the first part of Gramex secrets? Any issues you face? If anything strikes you, just put that on the chat window and we'll cover it. In the meantime, let me go on to a second aspect. Now, what this means is that instead of putting the file in gramex.yaml, I put it in another file called secrets.secrets.yaml. That may not be a big advantage. I'm just moving it from one file to another. Well, yes, I am not committing .secrets.yaml, and the git ignore that we have in Gramex in it automatically ignores .secrets.yaml, but that doesn't strike me as such a big benefit. Let's look at some of the problems we face. The first is that the client has to manage this file. It's gone into the client environment. I have no control over it. So if I've deployed it and tomorrow, let us say we want to change some of the configuration. Let us say we have even a database table name, and the client says, today I'm having this database table name. Tomorrow they change it, or they have a password refresh policy every month and they send us an email and we have to change it. But then to change it, we have to get into the client environment. That's going to be a little complex. So is there a secure way by which, even after we deploy it into the client environment, we can still update it? Well, the secrets URL is one such mechanism. So there is a special key called secrets URL and secrets key. What that does is fetches the URL, fetches the secrets in a secure way from a particular URL. Here's how it works. You can put in your secrets into the secret encryption tool. So let us say the secret key is ABCD. You can put in any long secure key and add in a key, let's say user ID and password, secret password, and click on encrypt secrets. What this does is it takes the secret key that we used, ABCD, and creates this kind of a string that encrypts this entire set of secrets. So first step that I need to do is copy this and put it somewhere publicly. It's encrypted, so it's safe to put this publicly. So let me add this to paste bin. So in paste bin, I can copy this link, paste it here, and create a new paste. So which means that if I access this raw URL, pastebin/raw/whatever, I will get this string. That is my secret URL. So if I take this and put it as the secrets URL, I can have other things also. But okay, let's say, yeah, well, I'm going to be overriding user and password. So let's not use user and password. Let's say alpha and beta. So if I have this replaced with the URL on pastebin, when Gramex loads, it will fetch this URL, decrypt it using the secret key, which is ABCD, and whatever is in this, which is effectively user and password, will get added here. So let's test that. We now have, let's say, alpha is equal to alpha, beta is equal to $beta. Supposing I didn't put in the secrets URL, if I commented this out and restarted Gramex, if I go to localhost 9988, I only get alpha and beta, user and password are missing. But let me add the secrets back and restart Gramex. And one thing you'll notice is that the first line Gramex printed was fetching remote secrets from this URL. So now, if I reload this page, I have user ID and secret password. I don't need to change anything on this server if I want to update it. What I can do is go back to this paste and, well, I don't know if I can edit it. Okay, I'll probably have to sign in to be able to edit it. Okay, which I haven't done. I may have, let's see. Hopefully I'll be able to make a change. Yeah, skip all of this. Okay, now can I access my previous space? It doesn't detect this is mine. Anyway, if I log in and change this URL to something else, the next time Gramex restarts, it will once again fetch from this URL all the remote secrets, so as you see here. And if there is an update there, we will get the data here. So that's from a remote update perspective. We don't necessarily need access to the server if our clients require the maintenance be done remotely. But in a secure way, we can pick a safe secrets key and encrypt whatever keys we want using the encryption tool into any repository that you want, and that could include putting it on gist.github.com or any other location. If you have any questions on remote secrets, to put them in the chat window. We have a question from Kamlesh. Should we encode values in secrets.yaml? No, you do not need to. You certainly can, but the ways in which .secrets.yaml can get exposed are possibility number one. Gramex itself serves from secrets.yaml. But in file handler, we have an explicit block against any file beginning with dot. So, and also on gramex.yaml. So neither of these needs to be secure. The reason why we are using a secrets.yaml instead of a gramex.yaml is because we don't want the code to be committed, because the history of the repo can potentially get available to others, and it's all right to share source code that tells the application, I mean, that tells us how the application works. I mean, internally across teams, it's fine to share source, but it's not okay to share secrets. So that's why we have secrets.yaml. There's no reason, therefore, to encrypt it, because it should not exist in the repo. It should not exist on your local machine unless you're authorized to have it. And it should ideally only reside in the server. If you have any other questions on this, on the remote capability of secrets.yaml, just put it on the chat window. We'll now talk about a third aspect of secrets.yaml, which is how does one create it in an easy way. So let's go to YAML. So in order to create secrets, there is a command now available in Gramex, that is when you install Gramex, called secrets. And this makes it easy to create a .secrets.yaml file. What you can do is type secrets space and a set of environment keys, and they automatically get saved into .secrets.yaml. So let's test this out. And I'll explain how this is useful in a short while. So if you type set, then set by default gives you a long list of environment variables. So all users profile, app data, application insights, blah, blah, blah. So let's say I want to save, so let's say I export user ID is equal to alpha and password is equal to beta. So now if I set, I will find user ID as one of my environment variables and password as another environment variable. So given this, if I say secrets, user ID, password, this will create a YAML file on the console that has user ID alpha, password beta. So I can say secrets, whatever keys I want, greater than .secrets.yaml. So now user ID and password are automatically in .secrets.yaml. Why is this useful? Well, all continuous integration systems have a mechanism by which you can put in environment variables in the UI, and these will be available when the application gets deployed. So let's test that out. What I'm going to do is put in these secrets into GitLab. So let's initialize this as a Git repo. And in gramex.yaml, I'm going to put in user ID is equal to user ID and password is password. So if I just run Gramex locally, this works. User ID is alpha, password is beta. But if I remove .secrets.yaml and run Gramex, these are now where is this? Is it cached? Wow. Secrets demo. Okay. File is deleted. Yes. This is interesting. Let's find out where this came from. Okay, so it hasn't loaded any secrets, but it's still getting the secrets. It's running on port 9988. It is the correct application. This is odd. Okay, that's correct. Interesting. I forgot. Sorry. Any variable also is picked up from the environment. So I have the user ID environment variable and password environment variable. Gramex picks those up also. That's fair. Now they have vanished. Good. So I don't have a secrets.yaml here, but even if I did, let's say I had a .secrets.yaml locally where I have user ID, ID and password, secret password, then while this would work, it should not get committed. So let's create a .gitignore and we ignore .secrets.yaml. If you run Gramex in it, this is automatically there for you. So git add, git commit, shell. Now I'm going to push this into code.gramener.com and create a new repo. So let's create this as secret test. And having created this project, let's add this and git push origin all of the branches. Now the repo is available here. Let's say we want to deploy it on GitLab's on uat.grammarly.com. So for that, we would take the GitLab ca.yaml that we normally have in the init repo. I'm just copying the GitLab ci.yaml from the Gramex init repo. Let's get rid of the validation script. So I want to deploy this only the master branch on Ubuntu at uat.grammarly.com with the app name, let's say secret test. And the setup, for now, we don't need any setup. And the version is, Python 3, version 1. I'm not going to specify, well, let's specify a port, UAT monitor, some not too busy port, 8060 doesn't seem too busy. 8050 also seems fine. Okay. Port, let's say 8050. We'll add GitLab ca.yaml and add deployment and push this. So with this, we now have our pipeline, which should have started. Pipeline has only one stage. It's checking the repo. And job succeeded. So now this is live at uat.grammarly.com/secret test. Not yet. Okay. Some time. But still hasn't been updated. Is it because I used home? Should I use Gramex in it for this? That's better. These are some of the pitfalls of not using Gramex in it, and I face them every time I avoid using Gramex in it. So, lesson for me as well. Let's go back to the pipelines. Second pipeline has started. And that seems to have succeeded. Let's try. No, not yet. Let's restart the server and view the logs. And to see if there's any error related to secret test. Nothing major that I can see. So UAT secret test. Okay, that works. So now we have user ID blank and password blank. To get the user ID and password here, I'm going to use a feature that is part of the CI/CD pipeline, which is in the settings. If I go to settings, CI/CD, I can put in any set of keys and tokens that, variables that are applied in the runner. So specifically, let's add variables here. So let's talk about what happens to these variables. They can be, okay, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you can use environment variables for passwords, secret keys, or whatever you want. Anything that's placed here is available to GitLab ci.yaml. So for example, if I created a setup script that said, let's say, secrets, user ID, password. What this will do is run the command secrets, which prints the user ID key and the password key. Let's see what this does. I add a variable, let's say user ID called user hyphen ID, and type is variable, environment scope is all, and add a variable called password, which is secret hyphen password. So now these two variables, user ID and password, have a value that can be seen only by the people who have access, the required access to this repository. And you can also choose to determine whether they should or should not be masked. So let's say password should not even be printed in the job logs. So, but user ID, I'm okay to print it in the job logs, so it won't be masked. Let's say we apply this kind of a configuration. Now, since I have put in a setup script that says secrets, user ID, password, and let's push this. Let's take a look at the pipeline now. Okay, this pipeline, so secrets, oh dear, okay. There is an issue. We are using an older version of Gramex in the Docker container that's on UAT. This has not yet been updated. So I will fix this by today. But what this would have done is printed from the environment variable, the secret and the user ID and the password. Then we would have been able to put a greater than .secrets.yaml, which would have saved it locally, and automatically this file will get copied into the target environment. I apologize, this is not working at the moment, so you will not be able to try this out immediately, but I will make sure that this gets sorted out by today and you can try it out anytime over this weekend. So what this allows us to do is set up a script where in GitLab CI, you can put in whatever variables, passwords you want under the variables section. And that automatically creates the .secrets.yaml on the server. If you need to change the user ID, change it here. The file itself is not committed. The file itself doesn't even exist in your machine unless you need it to. It can be in your environment variables, and it can be in the project's environment variables without it needing to be locally stored anywhere unsafe. So that's the third feature of the secrets, which allows us to deploy using continuous integration variables. These are available not just in GitLab, but on Travis, on GitHub Actions, pretty much any kind of CI system that our clients will use as well. With that, I'll pause. Any questions on any of the secrets aspects we've covered so far? If so, please put them on the chat window. Do try it out. If you think that you will have any password stored anywhere, at the very least, please move it to a .secrets.yaml file. And ideally, starting tomorrow, if you are going to be deploying it through a CI system, put it as a CI variable. All internal applications certainly should be done this way.
Anand, Kamlesh here.
Yeah, Kamlesh.
Anand, how can we maintain multiple versions?
Of
Meaning,
secrets.
or maybe credentials. For example, I have a different username password for the UAT, and for the development version or the production version, I have a different credentials. So how should I maintain that?
Correct. That would be using a different feature. So firstly, what I would do is create a set of secrets. Let's say deploy, let's say maintenance production ID, or say maintenance user ID, and a maintenance password. And similarly for production. Create these as separate environment variables. And which environment variable to use can be a conditional. Now, you can learn about conditionals. Let's go to search conditions. So here you have the option of using conditions in keys. So for example, if Windows is in platform, use this configuration. If not, use this configuration. Or if, for example, the variable C or the string C colon is in Gramex path, if Windows is in platform, and any set of conditions. Now, how can you differentiate between a maintenance code base and a production code base? Maybe you can look at the current working directory. So if, for example, /maint or maintenance is in the current working directory, then use whatever configuration you want. Or if you're running on different ports, you can check if the command line arguments for this particular command have listen.port is equal to 8001, or any of many other options. If you're running it on different servers, then get the server's host name itself and check for UAT. Depending on these, you can put in keys like this. So for example, let us say, let's say let's put this in gramex.yaml. Let's say we put it in variables. User can be if UAT in socket.hostname $maint user ID, and user ID if prod is in socket.get hostname, this can be prod user ID. And then similarly, password can be the corresponding. So now you can use user ID and password just as you normally would, because depending on the configuration, the correct user ID and password will be set.
Yeah, that answers. Thanks, Anand.
Anand?
Yes.
In the GitLab CI settings, I think we can set up the environment variables based on branches. So that would also be easier approach, I guess.
Got it. So you're saying that one branch is for production and one branch is for maintenance.
Right.
Got it. If that is possible, yes, absolutely. And I guess, well, yeah. So correct. Here we have this configuration being set up only for the master branch. And if we had a different, how do we specify multiples? Okay. Deploy production. Yeah. Here, if this is, let's say, production branch, then we can have a different set of keys going into secrets and passwords. And if in GitLab CI itself, we can do that. We have environments. Okay. It's possible to create environments. I have never done that before, but depending on the environment that we deploy it to, it can change, but I don't really know how to use environments. If branches work, yes, this is a strategy. Only for one branch, put in whatever setup you need. That's fine. Any other comments from anyone?
Hi, Anand. Gurudev this side.
Hi, Guru. Yes.
Yeah. So my question is, do we have any feature for role-based authentication?
Yes, we do.
Like this, we have admin user or normal user or something manager kind of thing, like that.
Right. There are two ways in which you can use that feature. So if you go to /guide/auth and look for roles. So the way we do this is, firstly, we have to define a role, and second, we have to use a role. I'll talk about how to use a role. So whenever we have a user who logs in and we want to protect a page for that user, we have auth colon and then a set of keys that define how we specify how we restrict the user. So membership is one way. So if the user object has a key called gender and that matches male, then this page will be allowed. And if the locale key is in en or es, and if the email is in this or this, then this particular page will be allowed. So that's one way of restricting the user. The other is adding these keys themselves. And the easiest way to add those is user attributes. No, not this one. Adding attributes, lookup attributes. Yeah. You can specify a lookup database, which can be put in as an Excel sheet, CSV file, SQLite database, Oracle, MySQL, whatever databases Gramex supports, in whatever table or sheet name with a specific ID. And then whatever is in here against a particular ID will get mapped as those credentials. Let's do a simple demo of this. So gramex.yaml. We have lookup attributes as a simple auth. Let's just say login. A user can log in as either alpha or beta. And there should also be a lookup.csv, let's say, and in which there is a user ID that allows us to specify multiple roles. So let's add lookup.csv, in which we have ID, comma, department, comma, what else do we want? Gender, let's say. So alpha is in department employee, and gender, let's say, is male, and beta is manager with role female. If we have this CSV file and we go back to gramex.yaml, and let's say we have a home page which has let's say URL handler, function handler, quads, and let's say this function simply returns as a string the handler.current user object. So we print this user for now. Let's start with this. So now I'm logged in as user alpha with ID alpha. Let me actually log slash alpha alpha. Should have done a lookup. Oh, user, sorry. Login alpha. Okay, here we go. So now the user object has a department employee and a gender male. If I log in as beta, then it's manager and female. Now, let's say I want to create a page, or let's just say this is a file handler. Or no, yeah, let's just say I will not allow employees to look at this. So put in the auth key here, where we have ship. Yeah, let's take this. The home page can only be accessed by, let's say, role, was it? Department. Department can be only, let's say, manager, and admin. We don't have that role yet, but that's our restriction. If we add this restriction and restart Gramex, on the home page, I'm logged in as beta, who's the manager. I'm able to access it. But if I log in as alpha and go back to the home page, it says I don't have access. So short summary, the information that you need is in the auth guide. The sections you need to look for are: one, look up attributes to add attributes to any user ID, and roles to restrict the usage by role. Did that help, Guru?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Any questions on this? Any part that is not clear?
Not from my side. Thank you.
Conscious, we have only 10 more minutes. So let me dive into, well, I was hoping to show 4 features, but at least I'll show 1.5 features. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was offline install. What I will do is quickly talk you through how to do it. And then we can go into questions. So the good part is both Conda and Docker installs are now available, which means that you can setup becomes a lot easier. Let me give you a demo of that. Use all of this. Connect to UAT, where I have a faster version of Docker installed. Now, what I'm going to do is create a new system using Docker, which has Anaconda in it. So I already created one. Right, fine. What I'm doing is using Docker to create a container named Conda. And incidentally, I'm exposing port 9988. This is based on the base version of Anaconda 3. So effectively, I have a new machine where I've installed Anaconda. Now, we run the same instructions that we have on installing Gramex. First, create a new Conda environment. If you're already on Python 3.7, you don't necessarily need to do that, but it's always safer to do it. And this downloads whatever dependencies are there for Python 3.7. Then Conda activate Gramex, that activates the second environment. So now I'm at the Gramex environment in this fresh machine. And the third is to run Conda install for Gramex, where we pull in the dependencies from 2 Conda repositories, Conda Forge and the Gremlin repository itself. This can take a little bit of time, maybe 2-3 minutes. So we just wait for it to start, and once it gets going, we should be set.
Meanwhile, one quick question. So let's say I have a mini Conda, okay, and if I do this command, so is there some dependencies which are dependent on Anaconda, or the Gramex holds its all dependencies? I mean, it will pull out from Miniconda as well.
You can use Miniconda. Gramex will pull out everything that is required from Miniconda.
Cool.
But there is a difference between running the pip version of the install process versus the Conda version of the install process. So firstly, if you ran this with Miniconda instead of Anaconda, this would work just fine. And on the other hand, if you just run after using Miniconda, the pip install Gramex version, that will not suffice. You additionally have to run these 2 commands.
Okay.
Just do that. Where did this go? Yeah, okay. So it's almost done, and we should have a working version of Gramex in a few seconds using Conda. The other, in parallel, actually, I can set up a Docker install again on UAT. This is even easier. So let's do a git pull, Docker pull. So that pulls the latest branch of Gramex, and then we run on whatever port. So I've already used port 9988 on the left hand side. So let me use 9989 for this instance. So now give it a few seconds. Okay. Now I am in Gramex. So if I run Gramex, which Gramex version, I'm running Gramex 1.64 in Docker. On the left-hand side, now that this is done as well, I'm running Gramex 1.64 via Conda. And both of these are, as you saw, reasonably smooth installation processes. Of course, pulling the repo might take a bit of time. Now, how does one run an application in this environment? Well, let's say I want to clone the Gramex guide and run it. So that's simply a matter of, okay, let me go to the temp directory here, git clone into the temp directory here. Let me go to the temp directory on this machine and git clone the Gramex guide. So cd Gramex guide on the left, cd Gramex guide on the right. On the right, it was at port 9989, and on the left, it's 9988. And in both cases, it's running. Let's just verify that it's actually running on both ports. So let me SSH into UAT again and curl localhost colon 9989. That seems to be working fine. Is it really the Gramex guide? Yeah, it is the Gramex guide. Similarly, port 9988, which is on Conda, that's also working fine. So the standard install process, at least on Linux via Docker and Conda, that's working fine. Now, how does one go about doing offline install? Do the same process on your local machine. So install Miniconda locally and install it maybe in a directory called Gramex offline. And then the same set of steps that we ran for Conda install. Conda create the environment and then install, and then this Conda Forge setup. Finally, you have a new Gramex offline folder. Just zip this Gramex offline folder and put it into the target machine. Now, ideally, you would have the same environment as a target machine, meaning if you're not ideally, you need to. If you're running Windows, then the target machine should also be Windows. If you're running Linux, then the target machine should also be Linux. But this usually isn't such a big problem. And then you just unzip it there and it should start working. If you don't want to, if you don't have the same target machine, then Docker works just fine too. What you can do is Docker pull and then run whatever we ran here. So what we did, for example, was we ran a git clone of the repository. So now the entire Gramex guide is in the temp directory as a repository. Now this entire Docker image, you can commit using Docker commit, and then run Docker save to save it as a tar file, zip it, send it to the target machine, and then run Docker load there. So that entire Docker machine is there on the target system as well. The good part about this is that you don't even need to worry about whether it's Windows or Linux. As long as you have Docker and they have Docker, it'll work fine. Ideally, I'd have liked to show you this, but we are almost out of time. So happy to take questions on this. And if there are more details you need or a demo that you need, we'll plan a session again next week. Any questions on the process?
That's fine, Anand. I'm gonna try that on a NPCI environment, and if I face something, I'll definitely get back to you.
Please do. And others, exactly. If you see any issues anywhere, please report it. The easiest way to report is just put in a no here and put in whatever feedback you want to put in. On this particular page, something is not working, whatever. Or if you have a question, click on ask a question, and that will automatically raise an issue about the particular page you clicked on the Gramex repo, and we'll resolve it there. These will be labeled as questions, and the CTO team will get back within 12 hours with a comment on what the status is. Any last questions? If you do, please feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat window. Just quickly summarize what we have covered so far. We covered deploying secrets in 3 ways. One, separately as a file that is not committed. Second, as a URL that you can pull securely. And third, via CI, so that it automatically gets created through CI variables as environment variables. We also very briefly talked about authentication and role-based access. We also very briefly talked about offline install. Do try them out. Let me know if you face any issues. We haven't spoken about multiple logins, which I was hoping to cover. We haven't spoken about setting up a Windows service, and we haven't completed offline install as well. I will set up a time next week or one of these future weeks to cover this. In the meantime, thanks very much. Do drop a note if you have any questions or comments. Bye, everyone.